Her sister gravely ill, debts piling. Alara Vance was cornered by brutal loan sharks. She thought Kalen Thorne, the cold billionaire CEO, was just a powerful stranger. But when he moved, crushing her enemies with terrifying force, his dark obsession claimed her. Is salvation in his golden cage a new kind of trap? The scent of dust and old parchment was Alara Vance's only comfort, a familiar embrace in the cavernous, dimly lit restoration lab of Thorne Auctions. Here, amidst the hushed reverence for history, her hands, slender and surprisingly strong, coaxed miracles from decay. Today, it was a fragment of a 15th century tapestry, its vibrant threads dulled by centuries of neglect, its story whispered only to her careful touch. Each delicate stitch, each faded hue, sang of a past grander than her own meager existence. She felt a profound connection to these broken things, a silent understanding of their suffering and the meticulous patience required to make them whole again. But the moment she left the echoing halls of Thorne, the phantom whispers of history dissolved, replaced by the biting reality of Chicago winter. The wind, sharp as a glass shard, clawed at her threadbare coat as she hurried down streets where designer boutiques gleamed like cruel jewels. Her own apartment, nestled on the fourth floor of a pre-war building with peeling paint and an elevator that groaned like a dying beast, was a stark testament to her life's accumulating failures. The chill seeped not just through the thin walls, but into her very bones, a constant reminder of the thermostat she couldn't afford to push past 60 degrees. Inside, the air hung heavy with the faint, cloying sweetness of Lily's cough syrup and the metallic tang of fear that had become a permanent fixture in Alara's chest. Her sister Lily, a fragile bloom with eyes too wide and luminous for her pale face, lay curled on the worn sofa, a thin blanket pulled to her chin. 7 years younger than Alara, Lily was her anchor, her only family, and her greatest burden. The rare genetic illness that slowly, relentlessly, consumed Lily's strength had also consumed every penny Alara earned, and then some. Dr. Albright, a kind man with weary eyes, had spoken in hushed tones of specialized treatments, of experimental therapies. Words that sounded less like hope and more like an impossible ransom. "How are you feeling, sweet pea?" Alara murmured, kneeling beside the sofa, her hand brushing Lily's damp forehead. The heat radiating from her sister's skin was a familiar, terrifying signal. Another fever. Another night of restless sleep, punctuated by gasps and shivers. Lily managed a weak smile. "Better now that you're home. Did you find a new arm for that statue?" Alara's heart twisted. Even in her fragility, Lily remembered the details of Alara's work, her small window into the world beyond their cramped two-bedroom haven. "Not yet, but I found a tiny, intricate piece of lace for the Duchess's gown. It's almost invisible, but it makes all the difference. Like you?" Lily whispered, her eyes fluttering closed. "You always find the invisible things that make a difference." The words were a balm and a wound. Alara wanted to make a difference. Desperately. For Lily. But the difference she was making felt like a deepening hole, a quicksand of debt that threatened to swallow them whole. Her late father, bless his optimistic, naive heart, had been a dreamer, not a businessman. His grand visions had crashed, leaving behind not legacies but a mountain of IOUs, the largest of which was to a man named Viktor Zarkov, a name that now echoed in the darkest corners of Alara's mind, a constant, low thrum of dread. The first veiled threat had arrived last month, an anonymous note tucked into her apartment door. "Tick-tock, Alara. Debts always come due." It smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and something acrid, like cheap disinfectant. Then came the calls to her landline, chillingly silent, or ending with a guttural chuckle. Tonight, however, the fear had crystallized. As she'd walked home, a nondescript black sedan had idled across the street from her building, its windows tinted opaque. A man, a hulking shadow, had emerged, lighting a cigarette. His eyes, even from that distance, felt like cold steel boring into her. He hadn't approached, hadn't said a word, but his mere presence was a declaration, a silent promise of escalating terror. She pulled the thin blanket tighter around Lily, then moved to the kitchen, her movements automatic. "Instant ramen." Again. The aroma, artificial and vaguely chemical, filled a small space. She picked up her worn phone, scrolling through the contacts. Dr. Albright. She needed to call him. Again. Ask about payment plans. Again. Beg for more time. Again. The shame was a bitter taste in her mouth, mingling with the cheap salt of the noodles. She was tired of begging, tired of fighting a losing battle. Her gaze fell upon the small, antique silver locket hanging on a chain from a hook above the sink, her mother's, her only tangible link to a past before desperation. It felt impossibly heavy, a weight of cherished memories she considered selling. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. But what choice did she have? Lily's shallow breaths were a constant, urgent reminder. Just then, a harsh metallic rattle echoed from the front door. Not a knock. A violent, deliberate shaking of the handle. Alara froze, her hand clenching around the hot ramen cup. The sound was too aggressive, too insistent to be a neighbor. Lily stirred on the couch, whimpering softly. There, here. The silent, icy dread she carried for weeks had finally found its voice. This wasn't just a threat anymore. It was an arrival. Alara's breath hitched, her eyes darting towards the door, then to Lily. She had to protect her. But how? She had nothing, no power, no resources. Just trembling hands and a heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. The rattling stopped. A heavy thud, like something being thrown against the wood. Then a low, guttural voice, muffled but unmistakable, seeped through the thin door, chilling her to the bone. The late-night quiet in the Thorne Auctions restoration lab was a balm for Alara's frayed nerves. Outside, Chicago howled its usual winter symphony, but within these thick, soundproofed walls, only the gentle rasp of her microscalpel against aged wood could be heard. She was meticulously working on a particularly enigmatic piece, a 17th century Venetian mask, rumored to have once belonged to a courtesan or a conspirator, its surface scarred by time, its painted eyes holding countless secrets. The delicate, almost translucent layers of grime yielded slowly to her practiced hand, revealing flashes of gold leaf and intricate, almost sinister designs. The faint scent of her specialized solvents mingled with the ancient musk of the artifact, creating a hypnotic blend that allowed her to momentarily forget the chill in her apartment and the shadow of debt looming over Lily's fragile health. Her focus, typically absolute, was abruptly shattered by a subtle shift in the building's ambient hum. A hushed murmur, then a sharper, more aggressive whisper, not the polite, cultivated tones of auction house staff, but something rougher, edged with menace. Alara's breath hitched. Her lab was typically deserted by this hour, a sacred space she guarded fiercely. Curiosity, a dangerous instinct she usually suppressed, pricked at her. She carefully placed her tools down, her heart beginning a slow, heavy thrum against her ribs. She moved silently to the heavy oak door, pressing her ear against it. Fragments of conversation filtered through, angry, low voices, punctuated by what sounded like a sharp intake of breath. A confrontation. In the main gallery, her mind raced, conjuring images of priceless artifacts damaged, of history violated. It was an instinct beyond personal safety. It was the conservator's primal urge to protect. Cracking the door open just a sliver, Alara peered into the opulent main gallery. The vast space, usually alive with dazzling light, was now cast in dramatic shadows, illuminated only by emergency track lighting. Her eyes immediately snagged on the scene unfolding near the central dais. Two men, built like brick walls in impeccably tailored dark suits, had an older gentleman pinned against a velvet display stand. The man, frail and white-haired, was clearly agitated, his voice a frantic mumble. He wasn't resisting with violence, but with desperate, futile pleas. A wave of unease washed over Alara. This wasn't a security incident. This felt darker, more personal. Her gaze was then drawn downwards. From the older man's struggles, a small velvet-covered box had slipped from his inner coat pocket. It wasn't a jewelry box, but something older, more unusual. As it hit the polished marble floor, the lid flew open, scattering its contents. Not coins, not gems, but tiny, intricate clockwork pieces, gears no bigger than a fingernail, delicate springs, miniature hands, antique watch parts. Incredibly rare, impossibly fragile. Before she could process the danger, before the fear could fully paralyze her, her professional instincts took over. A broken artifact, scattered and vulnerable. It was an involuntary, almost visceral reaction. She pushed the door open fully, her presence a silent, unexpected ripple in the tense tableau. Dropping to her knees, heedless of the men or the looming threat, she began to meticulously gather the tiny, precious fragments, her fingers moving with the familiar dexterity of her trade. The cold marble pressed against her knees, but she barely registered it, her focus entirely on the scattered history. What in God's name is happening here? The voice sliced through the tension like a perfectly honed blade, deep, resonant, and utterly devoid of warmth. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. Alara froze, her fingers still hovering over a minuscule brass cock. The air in the vast gallery seemed to thicken, suddenly heavy with an unspoken power. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The sheer weight of the presence that now filled the room was unmistakable. Calon Thorne. He emerged from the deeper shadows near a massive Greek sculpture, his form coalescing with terrifying grace. He wasn't just walking, he seemed to command the space around him. His suit, black as midnight, hung on his powerful frame with an almost predatory elegance. His shoulders were impossibly broad, his jawline sharp, carved from granite. But it was his eyes that held the true danger, chips of glacial ice, cold and analytical, yet with an intensity that promised utter ruthlessness. The two men who had been manhandling the older gentleman instantly released him, their postures shifting from aggressive to rigidly submissive, their faces pale. Even the older man, still trembling, fell silent under Calon's formidable gaze. Alara found herself unable to move, trapped on her knees, caught in the beam of his frigid attention. He wasn't looking at the older man, or the cowering goons, or even the scattered watch parts. He was looking directly at her. His gaze was like a physical touch, piercing, possessive, sending a shiver, not entirely of fear, down her spine. It was a strange, electric current, humming beneath her skin. She felt utterly exposed, vulnerable, yet also inexplicably, intensely seen. Her mind, usually racing with anxieties, was suddenly clear, focused solely on the man before her. He wasn't just wealthy. He radiated an aura of dangerous, almost primal authority. This wasn't the kind of power that came from boardrooms and stock markets alone. This was something ancient, something that spoke of unspoken rules and swift, brutal consequences. She swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. His eyes, unblinking, held her captive. There was no pity, no judgment, only a silent, intense observation that felt like a forensic examination of her very soul. He took a slow step forward, then another, the subtle click of his Italian leather shoes on the marble echoing in the sudden, profound silence. He stopped just inches from where she knelt, his imposing shadow falling over her, enveloping her. The rich, sophisticated scent of his cologne, a blend of sandalwood and something sharper, more animalistic, filled her senses, intoxicating and terrifying all at once. Her breath caught. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, a dangerous warmth against the sudden cold that gripped her. Without a word, Calon slowly, deliberately, knelt down before her. Not with grace, but with a fluid, almost intimidating power. His eyes, still locked on hers, held a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher, intrigue certainly, but also a raw, untamed curiosity. He reached out a hand, not to help her, but to pluck a tiny, gleaming watch spring from the floor beside her own trembling fingers. His touch was brief, fleeting, yet it sent a jolt through her, an undeniable, potent connection that hummed in the air between them. "You have a strange way of finding trouble, little conservator," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that was meant only for her. It was a statement, not a question, yet it held an undeniable undercurrent of something deeply unsettling. He paused, his thumb rubbing the delicate spring, his gaze never leaving her face. Or perhaps, trouble finds you. The implication hung in the silent air, heavy and menacing. What did he know? What had she just stumbled into? And why did the raw, dangerous power emanating from him make her feel a terrifying, exhilarating pull she couldn't deny? She was trapped, not by the scattered watch parts, but by the intensity of his gaze, by the unsettling certainty that her life had just irrevocably changed. The next few days bled into a waking nightmare for Ilara. The low, guttural voice at her door the previous night had been just the beginning. The following morning, she found the pristine white paint of her apartment door defaced with crude, crimson graffiti. Pay up, or else. The smell of cheap spray paint was a sickening, invasive scent that clung to her clothes, her hair, even after she frantically scrubbed it off. That evening, as she returned from Thorn, the same black sedan was parked across the street, but this time, two hulking figures leaned against it, their eyes following her every step, chilling her to the marrow. The threats escalated. A brick, wrapped in a threatening note, shattered her kitchen window, sending shards of glass exploding inwards, dangerously close to where Lily had been watching television. Ilara screamed, raw primal sound that was swallowed by the blare of sirens. Lily, trembling and pale, huddled against her, her small body racked with frightened sobs. The police, when they arrived, were sympathetic but ineffective. Another loan shark situation, ma'am. We'll file a report, but without more. Their voices trailed off, offering little comfort. Ilara knew the truth. Zarkov was a phantom, untouchable through legal channels. He operated in the shadows, where the law dared not tread. Her once meager salary, now dedicated almost entirely to Lily's mounting medical costs, was a joke in the face of Zarkov's demands. She clutched her mother's locket, its silver cool against her feverish skin, tears blurring her vision. What am I going to do? The question echoed in the suffocating silence of her damaged apartment. Lily's breathing seemed more labored, her coughs deeper. The fear was a living entity, consuming Ilara from the inside out. She was cornered, utterly, irrevocably desperate. It was amidst this crushing despair that Kalen Thorne made his move. Not directly, not yet. A crisp, cream-colored envelope arrived at Thorne Auctions addressed personally to her, hand-delivered by a stoic, silver-haired man who simply stated, "From Mr. Thorne." The paper felt expensive, almost silken, a stark contrast to the rough texture of her own crumbling life. Inside, there wasn't a note, but a single, impeccably printed card. It simply stated an address, an exclusive, discreet law firm, and a time, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Below that, a single line regarding your current predicament. Ilara's heart hammered. Predicament. He knew. Of course he knew. The man who had stared at her with those chilling, all-knowing eyes in the gallery. The idea filled her with a potent mix of terror and a terrifying, desperate hope. Was this a lifeline? Or another, more gilded trap? The next morning, dressed in her cleanest, if slightly faded, black dress, Ilara found herself in the polished, silent waiting room of Thorne and Blackwood. The air smelled of expensive leather and polished wood, a world away from the stale air of her apartment. A woman with an impassive face and eyes that missed nothing led her into a vast office. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat not Kalen, but a lean, sharp-suited man with shrewd eyes, Kalen's chief legal counsel, Mr. Alastair Finch. Mr. Finch wasted no time on pleasantries. His voice was smooth, devoid of emotion, like liquid ice. Miss Vance, Mr. Thorne has been made aware of your outstanding liabilities, specifically with Mr. Victor Zarkov, and, shall we say, certain other individuals threatening your sister's medical care. Ilara felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. They knew everything. The extent of Kalen's reach was terrifying. Mr. Thorne is prepared to resolve these issues, Finch continued, leaning forward slightly, permanently. All debts will be cleared. Your sister's medical expenses will be fully covered, ensuring she receives the best care available for as long as needed. In exchange, Mr. Thorne requires your exclusive artistic services. You will work solely for Thorn Auctions, dedicating your talents to his collection and whatever projects he deems appropriate. Furthermore, he paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. For your safety and that of your sister, you will reside in a residence provided by Mr. Thorne under his direct protection and surveillance. This is not a request, Miss Vance. It is an offer. An ultimatum, if you prefer. Alara felt a cold dread creep up her spine. Exclusive artistic services. Protection and surveillance. It wasn't a job offer. It was a reclamation. She would be owned, bound by an invisible leash. What about my freedom? She whispered, her voice barely audible. What about my life? Finch's lips barely twitched. Your freedom, Miss Vance, at present, is an illusion. Your life is dictated by a loan shark and the mounting medical bills of your sister. Mr. Thorne is offering you a different kind of life. A safe one. A secure one. A gilded cage, perhaps, but one where your sister breathes without fear and you can pursue your passion without the constant threat of destitution. The words hit her like physical blows. He was right. She had no freedom. Only fear. Her mind flashed to Lily's pale face, her labored breathing, the shattered window. The terror that had become her constant companion. The thought of Lily safe, receiving proper care, was a siren song, a desperate plea for surrender. Ah, I accept, Alara said, the words feeling heavy on her tongue, the taste of reluctant surrender bitter. Excellent. Finch produced a thick stack of documents. A standard non-disclosure agreement and a contract outlining the terms. Legal ownership of your outstanding debts will be transferred to Mr. Thorne. Your sister's care will begin immediately. A vehicle will be waiting to transport you and your belongings to your new residence this afternoon. The new residence was an apartment in a pristine, ultramodern high-rise overlooking the Chicago River. It was vast, sleek, and utterly silent. The air, filtered and climate-controlled, smelled of expensive cleaning products and fresh paint. Plush white carpets cushioned her every step, absorbing all sound. The furniture was minimalist, elegant, undeniably luxurious, yet somehow cold and impersonal. There were no dusty shelves of books, no mismatched mugs, none of the comforting clutter of a lived-in life. It was immaculate, a perfect, exquisite void. She wandered through the spacious rooms, her hand trailing over the cool marble of the kitchen counter, the soft velvet of an armchair. A walk-in closet, larger than her entire previous bedroom, was empty, waiting. The view from the floor-to-ceiling windows was breathtaking, the city sprawling beneath her like a glittering, indifferent beast. But with every step, every touch, the feeling of wonder was overshadowed by a creeping sense of unease. This wasn't a home. It was a gilded cage, undeniably beautiful, but a cage nonetheless. She was safe, yes, but at what cost? She was now under Kalen Thorne's protection, his surveillance. She was his. As evening descended, casting long dark shadows across the pristine floors, Alara stood at the window, staring out at the distant lights of her old neighborhood. Lily was safe. That was the most important thing. The thought was a fragile thread of hope in the vast, unsettling silence of her new gilded prison. But as the fear for Lily receded, another, more insidious fear began to bloom, the fear of Kalen Thorne himself and what his protection truly meant. She was no longer just the art conservator struggling to survive. She was now the property of Kalen Thorne, a man whose gaze held a dangerous, possessive heat. And she knew with a chilling certainty that her life, already irrevocably changed, was about to become far more complicated, far more intense, and infinitely more perilous. Her new gilded reality felt less like a rescue and more like a carefully orchestrated prelude. The first few weeks in the Thorne penthouse apartment were a strange ballet of luxury and isolation for Alara. The air, devoid of the city's grit and grime, felt almost too clean, too sterile. The silence, profound and unbroken, was a stark contrast to the constant hum of her old life, a suffocating blanket that pressed down on her, amplifying her own racing thoughts. She moved through the vast, immaculate rooms like a ghost, her every step cushioned by plush carpets, her presence barely registering in the perfectly ordered space. The view from the floor-to-ceiling windows was spectacular, a glittering tapestry of Chicago that mocked her confinement with its boundless expanse. Lily, thankfully, was thriving. A specialist, Dr. Eris, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, visited daily at a discreet private hospital Kaylin had arranged. The reports were consistently positive. Lily's fever had abated, her breathing steadier, her laugh, once so fragile, now rang with a clearer, more vibrant note. Alara received daily updates, not from Kaylin directly, but from a sleek tablet that magically appeared on her bedside table, preloaded with Lily's progress charts and Dr. Eris's reassuring notes. This silent, meticulous care for her sister was a potent balm to Alara's constant anxiety, yet also tightened the golden chains that bound her. Kaylin was delivering on his promise, but in a way that left no doubt of his omnipresent control. Her work environment at Thorn Auctions had also transformed. Her old dusty lab was now a state-of-the-art studio within the auction house's private wing, filled with every conceivable tool she could ever need: rare Japanese brushes, advanced microscopy equipment, bespoke organic solvents. Even the pigments she'd only dreamed of working with now lined the shelves, meticulously labeled. She spent hours there, lost in the therapeutic rhythm of her craft, working on pieces from Kaylin's personal, fiercely guarded collection. It was a haven, a sanctuary of creativity, yet she was aware of the subtle yet constant presence of Kaylin's security team, always just beyond her line of sight, always watching. Kaylin himself remained an enigmatic, imposing figure. Their interactions were sparse, formal, and charged with an unspoken tension. He would appear in the lab unannounced, his presence a sudden, chilling drop in temperature. He wouldn't speak, merely observing her work with an unnerving intensity, his glacial eyes scrutinizing her movements, her delicate touch. Alara would feel the heat of his gaze, the almost palpable weight of his scrutiny, making her hands tremble just slightly, even as she forced herself to maintain her focus. He exuded power, a raw, untamed force that both intimidated and, to her growing confusion, fascinated her. One blustery afternoon, she was working on a particularly complex restoration of a crumbling Renaissance fresco fragment, its delicate pigments threatening to flake away with the slightest tremor. Kaylin entered, his usual silent approach somehow more pronounced. He stood behind her, his breath a faint whisper against her hair as he leaned over her shoulder, inspecting her meticulous work. The scent of his cologne, that rich, dangerous blend of sandalwood and something distinctly masculine, filled her senses, causing a blush to creep up her neck. Her fingers, usually so steady, faltered. Careful conservator, his deep voice rumbled, so close it vibrated through her. Such delicate beauty requires an equally delicate touch. Alara swallowed, trying to steady her breathing. It's challenging. The binders are almost completely degraded. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, she felt his large hand, calloused yet surprisingly gentle, brush past her arm to pick up a small, specialized brush she'd set down. Their skin briefly met, a jolt of pure, undeniable electricity shooting through her, startling in its intensity. Her breath caught. He held the brush for a moment, his gaze fixed on the minuscule fibers, a strange, almost wistful expression on his face, a fleeting glimpse of something other than cold command. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual impassive mask, but Alara had seen it. A flicker of something. Humanity? Vulnerability? The thought sent a confusing ripple through her. Later that week, she caught another glimpse. She was returning to her apartment after a late night in the lab, the vast, empty corridors of the penthouse floor echoing around her. As she passed Kaylin's private study, the door was ajar. Through the crack, she saw him. He was seated at his imposing mahogany desk, not working, not on the phone. He was simply staring out the window at the glittering cityscape, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. His shoulders, usually so rigid with control, seemed to sag just slightly. The lines around his mouth, typically hard and unyielding, softened with a profound melancholy. He looked alone, utterly, achingly alone. The image, so unexpected, resonated deeply within her, stirring a cautious, unwelcome curiosity. Who was Kalen Thorne, really? The ruthless billionaire, the man who moved silently through shadows and orchestrated lives with a mere gesture, or the solitary figure staring into the night, carrying some invisible weight? The two images clashed in her mind, creating a confusing vortex of fear and a strange, budding fascination. The physical awareness between them intensified, a silent undercurrent to their sparse interactions. Her body, once numb with fear and exhaustion, was now hyper-aware of him. The way his eyes would track her across a room, the subtle shift in the air when he entered, the phantom touch of his hand. It was a dangerous game, this slow burn, played with unspoken glances and simmering tension. She knew he was dangerous, probably ruthless, but there was an undeniable magnetism to his power, a possessiveness that, despite herself, made her feel a strange kind of safety. He was her captor, her protector, and something else entirely. One evening, as she presented her completed restoration of a delicate ancient scroll to him in his study, he picked it up, his large hands dwarfing the fragile parchment. His fingers, calloused but gentle, grazed the edges she had so painstakingly reassembled. His gaze met hers, lingering for a beat longer than usual. "You have a gift, Alara," he murmured, his voice a low thrum that sent shivers down her arms. "A rare ability to see beauty in what others discard, to heal what is broken." His words were not a compliment, but an observation, a recognition that felt profoundly intimate. In his eyes, Alara saw not just admiration for her skill, but a deeper, more unsettling understanding. He saw her, truly saw her, not just the conservator, but the woman who pieced together fragments, who mended what was shattered. The silent, possessive intensity in his gaze told her he recognized the brokenness in her, just as he had seen the broken watch parts. And a terrifying, exhilarating thought ignited in her. He might just be the one person capable of seeing through her own carefully constructed facade, and perhaps even capable of mending her. But as she met his dark, unreadable eyes, she couldn't shake the chilling realization that to be mended by Kalen Thorne meant to be truly, irrevocably, claimed by him. And a part of her, the part that craved safety and respite from the abyss, was dangerously close to wanting just that. What would it take to truly fall into his orbit, to surrender entirely to the predator who had woven her into his golden cage? She knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified her, that the answer was lurking just around the corner, waiting for the right moment to strike. Life within the gilded cage of Kalen Thorne's penthouse had settled into a strange, unsettling rhythm for Alara. Her days were a tapestry of meticulous restoration in the pristine lab, followed by evenings of enforced solitude in an impossibly quiet apartment. The lingering scent of turpentine and aged wood from her work offered a comforting anchor in the sterile luxury. Lily's improving health, documented meticulously in daily digital reports, was a constant source of relief, a soft, warm glow that pierced the cool detachment of her surroundings. She saw Kalen rarely, but his presence was a palpable force, a silent current flowing beneath the surface of her new existence. Her cautious curiosity about the enigmatic man had deepened, evolving into a complex web of emotions, a grudging gratitude for Lily's safety, a persistent unease about his methods, and an undeniable, simmering awareness of his powerful, dangerous magnetism. She was a bird in a golden cage, yes, but the bars felt less constricting when she remembered the gnawing hunger of the lone shark and the icy grip of fear for Lily's life. Then the calm was shattered. An innocuous-looking email landed in her personal inbox, an account she rarely used since her transition to Thorne's secure network. The sender, Silas Croft, her old employer's biggest rival. The subject line, disturbingly casual, an interesting opportunity for a gifted conservator. Alara's breath hitched. She hadn't seen or heard from Croft in months, not since before her father's debts had become a death sentence. She opened it with trembling fingers. The email was slick, professionally worded, praising her unique talents and offering a freelance project with unparalleled creative freedom and significant financial compensation. But it was the subtle undertones that sent a chill through her, especially given your recent challenges. We understand the pressures a young woman faces, particularly when caring for family. Some situations require a more discreet approach than a corporate behemoth like Thorne might offer. Alara's blood ran cold. He knew. He knew about the debt. He knew about Lily. The manipulative insinuation was clear. He was offering a way out, but it was a trap, coated in honeyed words. He wanted her, not for her talent, but for leverage against Kaelin. Her first instinct was to delete it, to pretend it never existed. Her second was to respond, to firmly reject his advances, to show him she was not a pawn to be played. But what if that only escalated his interest? What if he turned his predatory gaze towards Lily? She felt a renewed wave of fear, a primal terror that eclipsed the quiet fascination she'd begun to feel for Kaelin. She was a target again, a vulnerable piece in a high-stakes game. For a fleeting moment, she considered going to Kaelin, exposing Croft's manipulative overture. But the thought of revealing her perceived weakness, of handing over another piece of her life to his ruthless control, made her hesitate. She wanted to handle this herself, to prove she wasn't entirely helpless. Before she could form a plan, Croft made his next move, a more direct hit aimed at Thorne auctions. A whisper spread through the industry like wildfire. The Romanoff Emerald, the centerpiece of an upcoming, highly anticipated Thorne auction, a gemstone of immense historical and monetary value, was rumored to be a forgery. Not a perfect replica, but one subtle enough to raise doubts among less experienced buyers, potentially causing a catastrophic loss of confidence in Thorne's authenticity. Alara, having personally overseen the emerald's recent mounting and inspection, knew it was utterly genuine. She had noted a faint, almost imperceptible scratch on its surface, a detail only a seasoned conservator would observe, a unique identifier that proved its authenticity. This sabotage was subtle, insidious, designed to create doubt, not outright proof. When the rumors reached Kaelin, the air in the auction house grew heavy with an unspoken tension. He summoned Alara to his private office, a minimalist fortress of dark wood and glass. He stood before the panoramic window, his back to her, radiating cold fury. The Romanoff Emerald, he stated, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the polished floor. You authenticated its mounting. You observed it. It's genuine, Alara asserted immediately, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. There's a hairline scratch near the base, almost invisible, where it was reset in 1897. A unique mark. Kaelin turned, his eyes, dark as midnight, fixed on her. A detail only an expert would note. Convenient, given the current whispers. His gaze was unervingly shrewd, as if probing for any hint of complicity. He knew about Croft's email. He knew everything. Alara felt a flush of shame, then defiance. I received an email from Croft. A job offer. Manipulative. I didn't respond. A muscle in Kaelin's jaw flexed. Did you now? His voice was laced with a dangerous calm. And you thought to handle this yourself? The subtle emphasis on yourself was a chilling reminder of her subordinate position, her supposed inability to navigate such treacherous waters alone. She bristled. I didn't want to bring my past problems to your doorstep, Mr. Thorne. He took a slow step towards her, his presence utterly dominating. Your past is my doorstep now, Alara. Your problems are my problems. And Silas Croft is about to learn precisely what happens when one attempts to compromise my assets. His eyes, usually glacial, now burned with a simmering, lethal intensity she hadn't witnessed since that first night in the gallery. Kaelin's response was swift, brutal, and utterly without mercy. The following days were a whirlwind of industry whispers, legal maneuvers, and a public relations blitz orchestrated with surgical precision. Financial news outlets began to report on unethical business practices at Croft Fine Arts, hinting at shady dealings and questionable provenances for several high-profile pieces. Suddenly, Croft's prize collection, once valued in the millions, was under intense scrutiny, its value plummeting. Investors pulled out, exhibitions were canceled, and his gallery, once a gleaming rival, became a pariah. Then came the public shaming. A meticulously curated exposé appeared on a prominent art blog, detailing Croft's history of leveraging artists' personal vulnerabilities for his own gain, citing anonymous sources with damning precision. The article included screenshots of emails that mirrored the one Alara had received, painting Croft as a predatory opportunist. The final brutal blow came with a leaked audio recording, just a few seconds long, of Croft's voice, thick with desperation, making a frantic call. "My men need to handle this. Thorne is destroying me. Find that conservator now." The context was vague, but the implication was clear. Croft, desperate and cornered, was resorting to violent tactics. That same night, Alara heard about the warning, not from Kalen directly, but from a hushed conversation between two security guards in the hallway, their voices low and grim. Croft's lead enforcer, a notorious brute known as Hammer, had been found in an alleyway behind his apartment, his hand meticulously broken, every single bone fractured. No witnesses, no forensic evidence, just a chilling, anonymous message carved into the brick wall above him. Alara felt a cold knot of renewed fear twist in her stomach. Kalen hadn't just defeated Croft. He had systematically dismembered his empire and delivered a message that resonated with brutal efficiency throughout the underworld. This wasn't just business. It was a personal declaration of ownership, a warning etched in bone and fear. He had done precisely what she couldn't, what she wouldn't dare. He had eliminated the threat. As she lay in her impossibly soft and impossibly vast bed that night, staring at the glittering cityscape, she felt a strange dichotomy of emotions. Renewed fear, yes, for Kalen's capacity for violence, for the ruthless, dark heart that beat beneath his tailored suits, but also grudging admiration for his unwavering effectiveness, his absolute, uncompromising protection. He was terrifying, but he was her terrifying. She was no longer just a struggling conservator, a desperate pawn. She was under Kalen Thorne's dominion, a protected possession, a claim etched in blood and fear. She knew then, with a chilling certainty, that she was truly caught in his web. His golden cage was now a fortress, built to protect her, to keep her. The shift from target to protected possession was complete. And as she processed the extent of Kalen's swift, brutal justice, she wondered what other darkness lay hidden within him, and if she, Alara Vance, would ever truly understand a man who had claimed her body and soul. The question hung in the air, a whisper of a dangerous, inevitable truth. Silas Croft's spectacular downfall resonated through the elite circles of the art world, a brutal testament to Kalen Thorne's power and his ruthless efficacy. For Alara, the lingering fear of Zarkov and Croft had finally, mercifully, receded. The constant hum of anxiety that had defined her existence now quieted, replaced by a strange, unsettling peace. Lily was thriving, her laughter echoing freely from the private hospital wing Kalen had secured. The pervasive sense of being a helpless target had shifted, giving way to a new reality. She was under Kalen's formidable, unwavering protection. The shift ignited a deeper, more complex loyalty within Alara. She still harbored a cautious trepidation about his methods, the cold violence inherent in his world, but was tempered by an undeniable gratitude. He had saved Lily, and in doing so, he had saved her. The golden cage now felt less like a prison and more like a sanctuary, albeit one guarded by a dangerous, enigmatic beast. Her initial confusion had begun to clarify, slowly morphing into a potent cocktail of cautious curiosity and a simmering, undeniable attraction. One unusually quiet evening, Alara was working late in her studio within Thorne Auctions, meticulously restoring a set of antique navigational instruments from Kalen's personal collection. The delicate brass and aged glass felt cool beneath her fingers, whispering tales of distant seas and uncharted territories. Kalen, as was his infrequent habit, appeared. He didn't speak, merely stood in the doorway, observing her with that intense, unblinking gaze that always made her heart skip a beat. She felt his presence, a powerful, dark anchor in the silent room. Tonight, however, there was a subtle difference. The usual icy detachment in his eyes was replaced by a shadow of something else, a profound melancholy that tugged at something deep within Alara. He wasn't scrutinizing her work. He seemed to be looking through her, lost in some distant, private pain. After a long waited silence, he walked over to a nearby display case, its contents currently empty, awaiting a new acquisition. His fingers, usually so precise, grazed the smooth, polished wood with an almost hesitant touch. He then reached inside, not to adjust anything, but to retrieve a small, unassuming object tucked away in a hidden compartment Alara hadn't noticed before. It was a tarnished silver compass, old and worn, its glass face cracked, its needle frozen. It was clearly not an artifact meant for public display. Kalen held it in his palm, his thumb stroking the dull metal with a tenderness that shocked Alara. His jaw, usually so set and formidable, softened just slightly. For a fleeting moment, the mask of the ruthless billionaire slipped, revealing a raw, aching vulnerability beneath. It was the face of a man who had lost something immeasurable, something vital. "My father gave this to me," he murmured, his voice rough, unusually quiet. "Said it would always guide me home." He was wrong. The words were cryptic, laden with unspoken grief and a deep-seated bitterness. He didn't elaborate, merely enclosed the compass in his hand, his knuckles white. The image of the powerful, indomitable Kalen Thorne holding a broken compass, his face etched with such profound sadness, burrowed deep into Alara's soul. She saw not the predator, but the boy, wounded and lost. Empathy, sharp and unexpected, pierced through her. He was not just a force of nature. He carried his own scars. "What happened?" she whispered, her voice soft, tentative, daring to step into his guarded world. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, a flicker of surprise, then something akin to recognition. He paused, his gaze assessing her, perhaps weighing the risk of revealing too much. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he placed the compass back in its hidden compartment, securing it. He walked back to her, stopping just a few feet away, his shadow once again falling over her. "Betrayal," he stated, the single word a razor's edge. "From someone I trusted. Someone I believed was family. It taught me that trust is a weakness. Love a liability." His eyes, now focused back on her, held a profound, chilling weariness, an ancient pain that resonated with her own experiences of loss and broken promises. "It taught me to build walls, to protect what's mine with extreme prejudice." The intensity of his gaze, the raw, unvarnished pain in his words, cracked open something within Alara. She understood. Not the specifics, but the underlying trauma. The deep, scarring wound that drove his relentless control, his possessiveness. He built walls because his heart had been shattered. "My father was like that." Alara found herself confessing, the words spilling out, unbidden, unexpected. Not with betrayal, but with hope. He always believed in the next big thing, the next grand venture. He chased dreams until they became nightmares, leaving me with the wreckage. I loved him, but his dreams, they almost cost me everything. Almost cost me Lily. She felt a strange lightness as the words left her, a sense of relief at finally sharing this hidden wound with someone who, inexplicably, seemed to understand. Kalen listened, his expression unreadable, yet his intense gaze never wavered. When she finished, he simply nodded, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement that spoke volumes. He didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. He simply acknowledged her pain, her vulnerability, with a silent understanding that felt more profound than any words. The air between them thrummed, thick with unspoken emotions. The space that had always felt so vast and imposing now seemed to shrink, drawing them closer. The delicate scent of ancient wood and modern solvent mingled with the dark, compelling scent of Kalen, creating an intoxicating atmosphere. He reached out, his hand slowly, deliberately, lifting hers from the workbench. His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a feather-light touch that sent a searing heat through her veins. Her breath hitched. Her body, hyper-aware of his proximity, responded with an electric current that thrummed from her fingertips to her toes. The cautious curiosity she had felt for him had morphed into something undeniably stronger, a fierce, primal desire that shocked her with its intensity. "You are not broken, Alara," he murmured, his voice a low, possessive growl that was meant only for her. "You are forged, and you are mine." He pulled her gently towards him, his eyes never leaving hers. The careful distance they had maintained for weeks dissolved in an instant. Her body met his, a startling collision of soft curves against hard muscle. His arms, strong and possessive, wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against his formidable frame. She felt the solid beat of his heart against her chest, a powerful rhythm that echoed her own frantic pulse. His head descended slowly, his gaze still locked on hers, searching, demanding. And Alara, lost in the potent blend of fear and overwhelming desire, didn't resist. She closed her eyes as his lips, firm and warm, found hers. It was a kiss born of shared vulnerability, of unspoken understanding, of the raw, undeniable attraction that had simmered between them for weeks. It was possessive, demanding, a silent declaration of ownership, yet also infused with tenderness that hinted at the profound connection they had just forged. Her fingers, usually so precise with delicate artifacts, now fisted in the expensive fabric of his suit jacket, clutching him as if he were her only anchor in a suddenly tumultuous world. His kiss deepened, devouring her, stealing her breath, igniting a fire within her that she hadn't known she possessed. She responded with an intensity that surprised even herself, pouring all her suppressed emotions, her fear, her gratitude, her burgeoning love, into the desperate, passionate exchange. In that moment, wrapped in his powerful embrace, Alara felt truly seen, truly accepted, truly desired. He understood her scars, just as she had glimpsed his. And in this shared vulnerability, in this raw, undeniable passion, she realized with a jolt that the golden cage was not just a prison. It was also a sanctuary, a place where she could finally, irrevocably belong. And as his lips moved from her mouth to her jaw, leaving a trail of fire, she knew that whatever danger lay ahead, she was ready to face it, as long as she was by Caelan Thorne's side. The unspoken promise of shared darkness, shared solace, hung in the electrified air between them, a binding oath. The tenderness that had blossomed between Alara and Caelan after their night in the studio had, for a brief, intoxicating period, transformed the gilded cage into a haven. Her heart, once guarded by layers of fear and desperation, had begun to unfurl, tentatively, trustingly, towards the enigmatic man who had saved her. His possessiveness, once a source of unease, now felt like a warm, encompassing shield. She saw the flashes of vulnerability in his eyes, felt the raw, undeniable passion in his touch, and believed, with a fragile hope, that she was finally safe. Lily's consistent progress was a testament to his power, a daily reminder of the sanctuary he had built around them. But the world Caelan Thorne inhabited was not one that permitted lasting peace, especially for those foolish enough to make an enemy of him. Silas Croft, humiliated and financially ruined, was a cornered animal. And cornered animals bite with a desperate, venomous fury. It began subtly. A sudden, unexplained glitch in Lily's hospital monitoring system. A brief, unsettling power flicker in Alara's otherwise impeccable apartment. Small, unsettling disturbances that frayed Alara's nerves, whispering of a lurking danger. Caelan, ever vigilant, dismissed them as minor anomalies, attributing them to system overloads or routine maintenance. But Alara, conditioned by a lifetime of precariousness, felt the cold dread coiling in her stomach. Then came the call. Not to Alara, but to Caelan. His voice, usually a controlled rumble, was a sharp, clipped command as he took it in his study. Alara, working in her adjacent studio, caught fragmented, chilling words. Hospital perimeter breached. Lily's room, a close call. They almost had her. Alara's blood ran cold. She dropped the delicate miniature she was working on, hearing the tiny ivory figure shatter on the marble floor, but not caring. Lily. They almost had Lily. She burst into Caelan's study, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. Caelan turned, his face a mask of furious self-recrimination. His jaw was clenched, his eyes burning with a dark, dangerous fire she had only glimpsed before. They almost got to her, he rasped, his voice raw with a barely suppressed rage. Croft. He found a weak point in the external perimeter. Diversion. He was aiming for Lily. The words hit Alara like a physical blow. Her sanctuary. Lily's sanctuary. Compromised. The illusion of impenetrable safety shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. A profound guilt washed over her, sickening and overwhelming. She was the weak link. Her past, her vulnerabilities, were a gaping hole in Kalen's defenses, a target that others could exploit. She was a burden, a liability, constantly drawing danger into their lives. "It's my fault," she whispered, her voice trembling. "My father's debts, Croft's obsession with me. I bring this darkness." Kalen's eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, were clouded with a torment she hadn't seen. He slammed his fist onto the desk, the heavy-wood groaning in protest. "No," he roared, his voice filled with self-loathing. "It's my fault. I should have foreseen this. I should have anticipated a desperate rat's last gasp. I was complacent." He ran a hand through his dark hair, his control visibly fraying. "I put you both at risk by thinking my walls were enough." His words, meant as a form of self-flagellation, twisted in Alara's mind, fueling her own burgeoning sense of inadequacy. He blamed himself because she was a weakness. He had thought his power, his wealth, his walls were enough. But she had proven otherwise. She was the chink in his armor, the vulnerability he couldn't afford. The tension between them, usually electric with unspoken desire, now crackled with a different, more volatile energy. Guilt, recrimination, and a terrifying sense of impending loss. Alara felt a profound heartbreak, a chilling understanding that her fragile dream of safety, a belonging with Kalen, was inherently flawed. How could they build a life, a family, when her mere existence invited such relentless, brutal threats? A few days later, the situation deteriorated further. Alara received a package, delivered anonymously to her studio. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was the delicate, miniature ivory figure she had shattered during the frantic call about Lily. Beside it, a single blood-red rose, its petals crushed, and tucked beneath the rose, a glossy photograph. It was a picture of Lily, taken through a hospital window, smiling weakly, utterly unaware. A fresh wave of terror, cold and absolute, washed over Alara. Croft was still out there. He was still watching, and he was mocking Kalen's protection, reminding Alara of her ultimate vulnerability. She took the package to Kalen, her hands shaking, her face pale. He examined the contents, his features hardening into an impenetrable mask of fury. "He's taunting me," Kalen growled, crushing the rose in his fist. "He's showing me where my defenses are weak. He's showing me how much of a target I am," Alara countered, her voice choked with a mix of fear and growing despair. "How much of a liability I am to you." Her eyes, filled with unshed tears, pleaded with him. "Kalen, maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I need to disappear. For Lily's sake. For your sake. I can't keep putting you both in danger." His head snapped up, his eyes burning with a dangerous mixture of anger and desperate possessiveness. "Disappear? You think you can just walk away?" His voice was low, laced with a chilling possessiveness that, for the first time, felt less like protection and more like absolute control, a suffocating demand. "You are mine, Alara. Your sister is mine to protect. There is no walking away. Not from me." The stark brutality of his declaration, coupled with the profound guilt churning within her, drove a sharp wedge between them. Alara recoiled not just from his words, but from the realization that his protection, while absolute, came with a price, her complete, utter surrender. The line between being protected and being possessed blurred into a terrifying, indistinguishable haze. She felt a profound sense of entrapment, an overwhelming desire to flee, even if it meant sacrificing the safety he offered. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't live like this, constantly waiting for the next attack, constantly being the reason Lily is in danger. You're building walls, Kalen, but I'm the one bringing them down. She felt an aching need for space, for air, for anything to break the suffocating intensity of his control. Without another word, Alara turned and fled. Not out of the apartment, not from Kalen's reach entirely, for she knew that was impossible. But she ran to her studio, locking the heavy door behind her, seeking solace in the only place she felt truly safe amidst the broken, silent remnants of history. She plunged herself into her work, her hands trembling as she meticulously pieced together a fractured ceramic, trying to mend the visible cracks while her own heart felt irrevocably shattered. Kalen didn't follow her. The silence from his study was more deafening than any shout. Alara sat alone in her studio, the cold certainty of her burden pressing down on her. She had willingly entered his golden cage, believing it would be her salvation. But now, as Croft's ghost continued to haunt them, she wondered if she had merely traded one abyss for another, a beautiful gilded abyss where her heart was breaking, and Lily's safety remained a fragile, perpetually threatened dream. The unspoken fear. What would Kalen do now that she had, in essence, betrayed his trust, his sense of control, by questioning his unwavering possessiveness? The answer, she knew, would be swift, brutal, and utterly transformative. The air in the penthouse apartment was thick with a silence more profound than usual, a suffocating vacuum left by Alara's retreat into her studio. Kalen stood alone in his study, the miniature ivory figure and the crushed red rose lying on his desk like accusations. His jaw was clenched so tight his teeth ached, his eyes burning with a dark, dangerous fire. She blamed herself. She thought she was a burden. She questioned his protection. The betrayal stung, not from a direct act, but from the insidious doubt she harbored, the belief that his fortress was insufficient, that he was insufficient, and the terrifying realization that Silas Croft had managed to not only breach his physical defenses, but also to poison Alara's nascent trust. This was no longer just about business or reputation. This was personal. This was about his. Kalen moved, a blur of controlled power. His comms clicked to life. "Find him," he snarled, his voice a low, lethal rumble that made his usually unflappable security chief, Marius, flinch. "Every resource, every connection. Burn the city down if you have to. I want Silas Croft. Now." His network, vast and shadowy, hummed into action. Money flowed like water, information like blood. Lawyers, hackers, enforcers, all moved with the swift, precise efficiency of a well-oiled machine. He didn't just want Croft. He wanted him broken, utterly obliterated. And he wanted Alara, not just safe, but secure in the knowledge that his protection was absolute, unwavering. Meanwhile, Alara, barricaded in her studio, found a fragile solace in the rhythmic precision of her work. She was attempting to reassemble the shattered ivory figure, a futile gesture that mirrored the fragments of her own heart. Each tiny shard was a painful reminder of Lily, of Kalen, of the impossible choice she felt she had to make. She tried to convince herself that leaving was the only way to keep them safe, to stop being the magnet for violence. But the thought of life without Kalen's dangerous presence, without the fierce, possessive love that had begun to bloom, was a colder, emptier abyss than any debt. The hours stretched into an agonizing eternity. Then a low rumble vibrated through the floor, growing in intensity. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming down the private corridor towards her studio. Alara's breath caught. She didn't have to wonder who it was. The sheer force of his presence preceded him. The door, heavy oak, shuddered. Alara, Kalen's voice, devoid of its earlier rage, was now a low, dangerous command. "Open this door." Now. She hesitated, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was terrified of him, terrified of his anger, but also drawn to him with an irresistible force. Slowly, reluctantly, she turned the lock. Kalen stood framed in the doorway, his eyes dark and intense, radiating an unyielding will. He didn't step in. Instead, he simply looked at her, then at the shattered ivory on her workbench. His gaze softened, just infinitesimally. He has Lily, he stated, his voice a chilling whisper that stole Alara's breath. Not from the hospital. A transit error. A setup. He knew I'd tightened security there. He anticipated my move. Alara's world tilted. Lily. Taken. The blood drained from her face, leaving her ghost pale. Terror, sharp and visceral, ripped through her. All her careful rationalizations, all her self-blame, dissolved in an instant. Lily. Her sister. Kalen saw the unadulterated terror in her eyes, and a primal, protective rage flared in his own. He didn't need to say another word. He simply reached out, pulling her close into the steel-hard embrace of his arms. He thinks he can use her to get to me, to get information. He thinks he knows my weaknesses. His voice was a low growl against her hair. He's about to learn that my weaknesses are my greatest strengths, and no one touches what's mine. He led her out, his grip firm, unwavering. She moved in a daze, the only constant the solid, protective presence of his body against hers. The city outside was a blur as they sped through the night in Kalen's armored SUV, a silent, grim procession. The destination was an abandoned meatpacking plant on the city's industrial outskirts. The air hung heavy with a metallic tang of old blood and decay, a fitting stage for the violence that was about to unfold. Inside, shadows danced eerily around rusted machinery and desolate concrete floors. Kalen's men, a silent, efficient force, moved like phantoms, their weapons glinting in the dim light. Alara was positioned behind a stack of crates, Kalen's arm a steel band around her waist. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice raw with urgency. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Then the confrontation began. Silas Croft emerged from the deeper shadows, flanked by a dozen of his own armed thugs, his face the grotesque mask of desperate triumph. He held a small, terrified Lily, her arm twisted painfully behind her back, a crude knife glinting at her throat. "Thorn." Croft's voice, amplified by the cavernous space, echoed with venomous glee. "Look what I found. A very valuable piece of your collection. Your little conservator's weakness, wasn't it?" He laughed, a chilling, triumphant sound. "Drop your weapons, Thorn, or the girl dies." Kalen's eyes, fixed on Lily, went utterly, frighteningly black. Alara felt the raw, animalistic fury radiating from him, a tangible force that made the air crackle. He was a predator unleashed. "You touch one hair on her head, Croft." Kalen's voice was a low, guttural growl that promised unimaginable torment. "And I will make you beg for the mercy of death. You will regret the day you were born." Croft scoffed, emboldened. "Empty threats, Thorn. You're predictable. You care about the girl. I can see it. Drop them." Kalen's eyes narrowed, his gaze flicking to his men, a silent, precise command passing between them. Then, with a sudden, explosive movement, he acted. He didn't drop his weapon. Instead, he lunged forward, a blur of controlled, lethal force, pushing Alara deeper behind the crates. The plant erupted into chaos. Gunfire tore through the air, deafening and brutal. Metal shrieked, glass shattered, and the stench of gunpowder filled Alara's nostrils. She huddled, trembling, peering through a crack in the crates. Kalen moved like a dark whirlwind, a savage ballet of violence. He disarmed, dismembered, and eliminated with terrifying precision. He was not just fighting, he was executing, a force of nature unleashed, fueled by a terrifying absolute devotion. One of Croft's men, a hulking brute, tried to flank Kalen, but before he could react, Kalen pivoted, his fist connecting with a sickening crunch. The man crumpled. Kalen didn't stop, his movements fluid, deadly. He was a monster, yes, but he was her monster, fighting purely for Lily for them. Alara felt a surge of adrenaline-fueled terror, followed by an overwhelming, almost intoxicating relief. This was the man she loved, in all his dangerous, terrifying glory. Kalen's gaze never left Lily, even as he fought. He carved a bloody path towards Croft, a relentless, unstoppable force. Croft, his face now pale with dawning horror, saw the inevitable. He screamed, trying to use Lily as a shield, but Kalen was too fast. With a brutal, precise move, Kalen disarmed Croft, twisting the knife from his hand and sending it clattering to the concrete. He scooped Lily into his arms in one swift motion, securing her safely behind him, away from the chaos. Then his full, unbridled fury turned on Croft. Kalen slammed him against a rusted pillar, his hand clamped around Croft's throat, lifting him clear off the ground. Croft gagged, his face turning purple, his eyes wide with desperate terror. "You think you can touch what's mine?" Kalen's voice was a low, murderous snarl, devoid of any mercy. "You think you can take my family?" He tightened his grip, a dark promise of oblivion in his eyes. Alara watched, a tremor running through her. This was the abyss, the true face of his power. It was breathtakingly terrifying. And for the first time, she truly understood the depth of his possessive love, a love so fierce, so absolute, it could shatter worlds. The abandoned meatpacking plant, moments ago a cacophony of gunfire and brutal combat, now lay eerily silent, save for the ragged breaths of the survivors and the faint, metallic scent of blood. Kalen stood amidst the carnage, victorious, his dark suit torn, crimson stains spreading across his shoulder where a bullet had grazed him. But his eyes, though still burning with a dangerous intensity, were fixed entirely on Lily. He held the small girl protectively, her face buried in his chest, her sobs slowly subsiding into trembles. Alara emerged from behind the crates, her legs unsteady, her mind reeling from the raw violence she had just witnessed. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and an overwhelming surge of relief. Lily was safe. That was all that mattered. Her gaze found Kalen, his imposing figure silhouetted against the dim industrial light. He was injured, bloody, but undeniably triumphant. He was a monster, a force of brutal nature, and he had done it all for them. As Kalen gently handed Lily over to one of his trusted men, who whisked her way to a waiting, secure vehicle, his eyes found Alara's. The fury that had blazed in them moments ago had receded, replaced by a searing intensity, a possessive fire that now burned solely for her. He moved towards her, his stride purposeful, unwavering, until he stood directly before her. "Alara," he murmured, his voice rough, thick with suppressed emotion. He reached out, his large, blood-stained hand gently cupping her jaw, his thumb stroking her pale skin. She flinched, not from fear of him, but from the lingering shock, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "No, just shaken." Her voice was a fragile whisper. She looked at his shoulder, the dark bloom of blood against his expensive fabric. "You're hurt." A scratch, he dismissed, his gaze never leaving her face. The tenderness in his touch, the profound concern in his eyes, was a stark contrast to the brutal spectacle she had just witnessed. He was still the predator, but for her, he was also the protector, the unwavering anchor in a storm of chaos. He pulled her into his embrace, his good arm wrapping around her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. But instead of suffocating her, his embrace felt like the only safe place in a world that had suddenly gone mad. She buried her face in his chest, inhaling the complex scent of his body, expensive cologne, gunpowder, and the coppery tang of his blood. She clung to him, trembling uncontrollably, finally allowing the full weight of the trauma to wash over her. "He won't touch you again," Kalen vowed, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated through her. "Neither of you. Ever." And he was true to his word. The systematic destruction of Silas Croft began immediately, orchestrated with Kalen's usual ruthless efficiency. The police, mysteriously alerted to Croft's illicit activities, swarmed the abandoned plant, finding not only Croft's injured men, but also a trove of incriminating evidence against him, falsified documents, smuggled artifacts, and enough financial fraud to ensure a lifetime behind bars. Kalen's network provided airtight testimony from anonymous sources, sealing Croft's fate legally. But Kalen's justice wasn't confined to the legal system. Financially, Croft's remaining assets were seized. His name dragged through every major art publication, his reputation irrevocably shattered. Socially, he became a pariah, disowned by his peers, his name synonymous with greed and depravity. The punishment Kalen meted out was cold, calculated, and utterly satisfying in its grim completeness. It was not a quick, merciful death, but a slow, agonizing demise of everything Croft valued: his power, his wealth, his name. It was Kalen's dark justice, tailored to fit the crime, ensuring that Croft would suffer for every moment of fear he had inflicted upon Alara and Lily. Back in the pristine silence of the penthouse, Kalen personally supervised Alara's care. He dismissed the frantic Dr. Marius had called, insisting on treating the grazed bullet wound himself, his large, capable hands surprisingly gentle as he cleaned and bandaged the wound on his shoulder. He then turned his full, unwavering attention to Alara. He ran her a warm bath, infused with calming essential oils, and sat patiently outside the door, his silent presence a powerful anchor. He brought her warm tea, coaxed her to eat, and simply held her as the tremors of shock slowly subsided. The healing was gradual. Alara still flinched at sudden loud noises, still woke in the dead of night with the acrid scent of gunpowder in her memory. But with Kalen's unwavering presence, his fierce, possessive care, the sharp edges of trauma slowly began to dull. He never left her side, working from his study with the door ajar, his powerful presence a constant, reassuring hum in the background. Lily, too, thrived under Kalen's watchful eye. The security around her private hospital wing was now impenetrable, a silent army ensuring her complete safety. Kalen would arrange for Alara to visit her every day, sometimes even accompanying her, his imposing figure a quiet sentinel in the bright, cheerful children's ward. He even bought Lily a small, intricate porcelain music box, the one Alara had been working on before the crisis, its delicate melody a soft lullaby in the otherwise stark hospital room. One evening, as Alara sat on the vast, comfortable sofa in Kalen's living room, a soft blanket draped around her, Kalen sat beside her, closer than he ever had before. He held her hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles, a silent gesture of comfort and possession. "You are safe now, Alara," he stated, his voice a low, resonant rumble. "Lily is safe. Croft is gone. He will never be a threat again." His eyes, dark and intense, sought hers, and in their depths, Alara saw not just protection, but something deeper, more profound, an undeniable, possessive love that resonated with her own burgeoning feelings. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. The lingering trauma was still there, a faint echo, but it was overshadowed by an overwhelming gratitude, a fierce, protective loyalty that now bound her to this dangerous, complicated man. She was no longer just a struggling conservator, a pawn in a larger game. She was his, claimed not just by circumstance, but by an undeniable, consuming love. She had endured the abyss, witnessed Kalen's fury, and emerged, not unscathed, but stronger, forged by fire. And in the unwavering intensity of Kalen's gaze, in the tender possessiveness of his touch, Alara felt a profound sense of rebirth. The past, with its debts and terrors, was finally gone. Her future, intertwined with this dangerous, powerful man, stretched before her, a canvas waiting to be painted. And she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. A year had passed, a slow, gentle unfolding of time that felt both impossibly swift and eternally long. The harsh edges of winter had yielded to the soft embrace of spring, then the languid warmth of summer, before autumn painted Chicago in fiery hues. For Alara, the past year had been a journey from the precipice of despair to the quiet, profound peace of belonging. The memories of Zarkov and Croft were now distant echoes, muted by the unwavering security of Kalen's presence. Lily, a testament to Kalen's boundless resources and Alara's relentless love, was not just healthy, but thriving. Her laughter, once fragile and hesitant, now bubbled with unrestrained joy as she raced through the sun-drenched halls of Kalen's sprawling estate, her cheeks flushed with health. The medical treatments, cutting-edge and meticulously managed, had worked miracles. She attended a private school, her curious mind devouring books, her spirit unfettered by illness or fear. She adored Kalen, seeing in him not the dangerous CEO, but the kind, quiet man who brought her rare storybooks and listened patiently to her elaborate tales. Alara had found her own sanctuary within Kalen's world. Her art restoration studio, a magnificent, light-filled space within a restored historic building, had quickly gained renown. Funded by Kalen, yes, but built entirely on her unparalleled talent and meticulous dedication. Clients, discerning collectors, and prestigious museums sought her out, trusting her with their most fragile, priceless treasures. The scent of aged wood, rare pigments, and her specialized solvents was her constant companion, a comforting reminder of her purpose, her passion, her reclaimed life. She was respected, fulfilled, and no longer just a struggling conservator, but a master of her craft. Kalen's world, while still undeniably powerful and occasionally shadowed by the demands of his empire, had softened around the edges. He still commanded, still controlled, but a subtle warmth had seeped into his formidable demeanor, especially when his gaze rested on Alara or Lily. His meetings were still clandestine, his business dealings still ruthless, but his evenings were now spent in their quiet sanctuary. He would often find Alara in her studio, watching her work with an unnerving intensity that still sent shivers down her spine, though now they were shivers of desire, not fear. His possessiveness, once a source of apprehension, had become a comforting constant. It was not a cage, but a devotion so absolute it left no room for doubt or fear. It was in the way his hand would find hers across a polished table, the subtle tightening of his arm around her waist, the lingering heat of his gaze that always sought her out in a crowded room. She was his, undeniably, irrevocably, and the knowledge filled her with a deep, primal contentment she hadn't known was possible. One crisp autumn evening, under a sky ablaze with twilight colors, Kalen led Alara to a hidden alcove in the sprawling garden of his estate. Ivy-covered stone walls, fragrant with late-blooming jasmine, enclosed them in a secret, intimate space. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. Lily was asleep, safe in her room, her dreams undoubtedly filled with the magical adventures of her storybooks. Kalen turned to her, his dark eyes, usually so guarded, now alight with an emotion that stole Alara's breath. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small, heavy velvet box. It wasn't a diamond, not the ostentatious display of wealth she might have expected. Instead, he presented her with a ring crafted from darkened steel, minimalist and powerful, engraved with a single intricate symbol, a stylized knot ancient and unbreakable, signifying eternal binding. Alara, he began, his voice the low, resonant rumble, deeper, more intimate than she had ever heard it. You entered my world out of desperation. I claimed you out of necessity. But somewhere along the way, in the quiet strength of your hands, in the fierce, protective love you hold for your sister, you unwound the walls I'd built around myself. He took her hand, his large, powerful fingers gently enclosing hers. My world is dangerous. My heart, once shattered, is now irrevocably bound to you. I don't offer you a conventional life or a love without shadows. I offer you my absolute protection, my unwavering devotion, my darkest possessiveness. He paused, his gaze locking onto hers, intense and unyielding. I claim you, Alara Vance, my conservator, my solace, my wife. Will you bind yourself to me, not just by circumstance, but by choice? Will you accept this darkness and make it our light? Tears welled in Alara's eyes, hot and unexpected. This wasn't a proposal. It was a powerful declaration, a solemn vow exchanged in the hushed intimacy of their secret garden. It was everything she craved, unwavering security, fierce protection, and a love so profound it transcended societal norms. Yes, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, Kalen. I claim you too. He slid the steel band onto her finger. It felt heavy, cold, undeniably real. Then he pulled her into a deep, consuming kiss that sealed their unspoken vows. It was a kiss of triumph, a belonging, of a fierce, enduring love forged in the crucible of darkness and desperation. Their darkly happy new family found its rhythm in the quiet luxury of the estate. One crisp Sunday afternoon, the autumn sun streamed through the arched windows of their grand living room. Alara sat on a plush velvet sofa, her new steel ring gleaming subtly on her finger, reading aloud to Lily from a richly illustrated book of ancient myths. Lily, now a vibrant, curious child, nestled against her, utterly captivated. Kalen stood in the doorway, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, observing them. His gaze, once so often cold and analytical, now held a profound tenderness, a deep, unwavering contentment. He watched Alara's animated expressions, the soft curve of her smile, the way her hand absently stroked Lily's hair. And he watched Lily, her face wrapped with innocent wonder. This was his world now, his sanctuary, built on the strength of his power, yes, but softened, illuminated by the undeniable light that Alara and Lily brought into his life. His eyes met Alara's across the room, and a silent understanding passed between them. He raised his glass slightly, a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture, a final, unwavering statement of ownership and profound love. He had found his home, not in the cold, calculated world of auctions and power, but in the fierce, beating heart of the woman he had claimed. Mine, he thought, the word echoing in his mind, not with possessive dominance, but with a deep, satisfied peace. Alara, Lily, his family, his life, his everything. And in the quiet strength of that belonging, in the unwavering security of his dark, encompassing love, Alara knew, with absolute certainty, that she had finally found her true home. Isn't it true that sometimes the chains that bind us most tightly are forged not by others, but by our own fears? Alara Vance, trapped by debt and shadows, believed she was a burden. Yet in Kalen Thorne's dangerous embrace, she found a sanctuary forged from fierce protection and undeniable love. Her past didn't define her worth. It simply sculpted her resilience. This story reminds us that even when life pushes us to the abyss, we are capable of profound strength. Our scars don't diminish us. They mark our survival, making us worthy of a love that sees our broken pieces and calls them beautiful. If Alara's journey from despair to defiant love resonated with your soul, if you too believe in finding light in the darkest places, join our community. Like this video, subscribe for more stories of unbreakable hearts, and share in the comments. My scars tell my story. Together we heal.